This talk is called JavaScript minus JavaScript, and it's basically, hopefully, a little bit of a challenge to a lot of people here who are JavaScript developers in some sense in their day-to-day jobs. Yes, JavaScript minus JavaScript plus Star Wars. Yeah. Who's excited for Rogue One? Anyone? Woo! Me too. I don't know if you can tell, but I really love Star Wars. My name is Sarah Meyer. I'm a software engineer with BuzzFeed in New York. And my Twitter is right here if you disagree with this and want to fight me. So why even bring Star Wars into this? Actually, because the first time I gave this talk was the Force Awakens release night, and I didn't want to choose between dressing up in a costume and giving a talk about JavaScript, my two favorite things. So, and I started working at BuzzFeed since I went here, so this is going to have some listicle elements, like 3 reasons Star Wars helps us understand web development. Let's go through them together. Reminds us to use our powers for good. Opens up a vast world of magic and adventure. And isn't it kind of crazy that we do this instead of working on spaceships? Web development. You know, Star Wars, similarly, is a magical world that has interstellar travel and human cloning, but not Wi-Fi or birth control. Gotta have your priorities in order, right? So I think we're not gonna have any audio for this, but I'm pretty sure I can. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. And he dies. But who knew that Yoda had so much to say about technical debt, really? All right, so for everyone here, I have a mean question. Does your website work without JavaScript? So this is the public shaming volunteer hour. Would anyone like to raise their hand and tell me the URL of a website? Could be yours, could be somebody else's. Just a website for us to check out and see if it works without JavaScript. Yes, my friend.
Dogvacay.com.
Dogvacay.com. Well, that sounds great. Those are like interesting things. So first of all, let's turn off JavaScript. Oh my God, this is really scary. Look, we're going into a whole new world here. So dogvacay.com, nice. No, you've got content here. I can see what you're doing. You're clearly doing some progressive loading of your images, so those aren't coming in. Do you mind if I try to enter something on this form?
Go for it.
Like say I live 1024. Maybe I can just do this, 12/12/16, 12/13/16. Yeah, that button doesn't work, does it? All right. Oh no, oh my God. Hey, look at this. Everyone, I'd like a round of applause for the gentleman in the front. Okay, anyone else want to do a website? You know, could be yours, could be somebody else's? No? No? Okay, I'm gonna do one of my favorite ones then. So anyone know Bustle? Probably not. Oh, actually they improved it. They used to not work without JavaScript. Okay, I got a link from one of my friends recently. It was a site that she was sent to. No, never mind. Okay, anyone, one more website. Anyone from the crowd? One more. Mary Sue? The Mary Sue? Okay, yeah, I like the Mary Sue. That's a good one too, because you're a content site, right? Okay, looks good. It's a blog. These links work? Yeah, I can still get to the links. Okay, so why should any of this matter, right? These are sites, you know, we have JavaScript enabled on them. The percentage of people who actively have JavaScript turned off in their browsers is, I've seen it estimated by the BBC's tech team at around like 1%. So why would you care about that? Well, I started thinking about this after seeing some anger from some friends of mine. Maybe we can just turn down the JavaScript. And hard to put into words how utterly broken JavaScript-first web development is. So what would JavaScript-first web development mean? Well, it's probably something that you might have been doing around like 2012, maybe, if you were working on a single-page web app. All that your initial page load does is call some HTML, which contains script tags, which go out and then get a whole bunch of other data. So without JavaScript enabled on such a website, you would see nothing. I should have done some more. There's like Google Groups, for instance, is still this way. So what then would JavaScript first web development be? I would describe it as a site that only works as intended with JavaScript enabled and functioning. I used to work at an e-commerce company. While I was there, I was doing stuff similar to that first site we saw, where filtering was sort of the main thing. E-commerce sites are basically just order forms dressed up in very fancy ways. But you need that, and you need the ability for people to find products on them. So in that sense, they're very interactive. E-commerce has one set of needs. They're always chasing conversions. Do you see the Star Destroyer is chasing the conversions? So maybe that could be said to be like the dark side of web development. But there's another kind of web, which is what I work on now, which is sort of a read-only web. People interact with content in a fairly one-sided way on BuzzFeed.com. You might have a comment section, and it does matter to people, but it is in no way, shape, or form what people are coming to the site for. If you're on the internet to read the comments, you're probably doing the internet wrong. So in that sense, working at BuzzFeed is a great opportunity for me to focus on what I consider to be the essentials of web development, which is delivering content as fast as possible to as many people as possible. It's felt like awakening to the force and becoming suddenly super powerful. So here's a question. Have you ever seen something like this? Watch that scroll bar on the right there. Hopefully you guys can all see it. So this is a scroll bar. It kind of looks like a normal scroll bar, but it is styled very slightly differently. For this, whoever made the Adidas website has thrown away the ability to scroll with the space bar. They have thrown away the ability to scroll with anything that isn't mouse controls. Doesn't work on touch devices anymore. And although I haven't verified this because I am not personally a user who needs assistance to read websites, I am pretty sure that this is completely inaccessible. There is no way to interact with these elements without a mouse and the ability to use it. That's very, very bad. So here's also something that I've started seeing on websites since Tumblr did away with their old reblog interface and started using modals. Then Twitter started doing it too. Very often on websites, if you click on something, it's not a real link. You just have functionality that pops up with JavaScript, right? And that's fine, because your JavaScript works. You wrote it. You didn't mess up your JavaScript, did you? You would never do that, would you? So why, again, is this bad? Well, I'm going to show you another example, this from a site that I used to work on. This was something that, in the usual way of product managers chasing engagement. They want more clicks, more conversions. So they come up with a cute idea. We're going to let people create new short lists of products that they want, right? So this was where that functionality lived. Did you see it? That was it. This is functionality that we considered to be important, but the only place that it lived was on a page that was not its own, and the only way to access that functionality was by showing and hiding an element with JavaScript. So while that's fine now, right? Again, everything is working. So here's another beautiful quote from, what do you think the only hope is for a user getting to a part of your site? Does anyone have an idea? How do people get to parts of your site? Links. So what is a link is a URL, right? Or a way of accessing a URL. If functionality on your site does not have its own dedicated URL, then you have created an accessibility nightmare not just for your users, but for yourself. The only way to access that functionality is to spin up an entire instance of the app which created it, and then to have that execute error-free. If you do not have a URL by which you can access this functionality, then in the future, as requirements change, as perhaps other supplementary parts of that app get closed off, you're going to have an extremely difficult time literally finding that again. So that is the Sarlacc pit of web development, is when you don't have any URLs. Well, so we're getting at least modestly technical here, but there's somebody much more technical than I could ever be. There are robots reading your website right now. Some of those robots are not under your control. They belong to the search engines or other people who might be trying to read your website. Some of them, though, do belong to you. When you have an integration test run that is being run on like Capybara or something, you have a robot that basically crawls your site to try to access it. If that is very difficult right now, if you find yourself implementing a lot of like AJAX, like timeouts to deal with AJAXs and AJAX requests in your acceptance tests, that probably is a sign that your site is not very accessible to the robots. They don't understand human behavior. They do not have hands like us. They do not have eyes like us. They are like, robots are both flaky and easily confused. But we still have to treasure them because they are doing work that we don't want to do on our own websites. Have you ever like scraped one of your own websites? It can be a lot easier. So how do we actually solve these problems? Well, a buzzword that has been around for a couple of years now is isomorphic JavaScript. And this is the notion that you run the same JavaScript code on your server as on your front end. This is obviously a Node conference. Everyone is very familiar with the notion of server-side JavaScript, but I still see people asking how they can actually achieve isomorphism, especially if you're not coming from a place that has an existing Node stack. Maybe you're on Python, you're on PHP, you're on Ruby. You have no prospects of being able to do a total code base migration in any reasonable amount of time. Well, there are solutions nonetheless. The most important thing to do is to create a mapping between the page state and the URL, a mapping that goes both ways. So basically, those URLs, right, are the essence of finding stuff on the internet. If the URL is updated constantly in response to changes on the state of the page, then you will be able to respond either to HTML requests HTML requests of that page, or you can respond to XHR requests for that same URL. In that case, what you can do is conditionally render either HTML or JSON depending on the request headers. So one thing that can look like is a little bit like this. This is a very small code sample that basically splits into two paths. This initial state, this is a React application that's being discussed, but it's my understanding that server-side rendering and isomorphism are well worked out for Ember as well, at least. So all that this is doing is that if it is an XHR request, all that the request gets back is the initial state in JSON form. If it is not an XHR request, then we take that same initial state in the page data, and we send down the wire the full HTML. So this is like this is the best of both worlds then, right? In terms of we get the fast response times of single page web apps where we don't have to do a full reload every time we want new data. Like this is why we started using AJAX for everything in the first place anyway, right? But you also get sites that load at least to a certain minimum standard of viability on first page load in response to HTML requests. So we tried server-side rendering and couldn't believe the speed gains. Obviously, your implementation may vary, but without having to do the initial, so you have two options, right? You can either get full HTML and then start to kick off more rendering and stuff later for optional components, or you can get skeleton HTML, bunch of script tags, start asking for JSON, render that response into the page. The second option is much slower. We found it to be, I can't do this math back, what's 50% faster but in slower terms? A live talk is no place for arithmetic. So here is something else this is one of my favorite websites in the entire world, the New York Times website, but watch this very bad thing as it loads. Oh my God, that late loading ad that pushes down the content as it goes. Now this video is actually slowed down, but one of the things that I find most irritating personally as a user is when I click on some content and I expect it to be there, but it isn't, because something else has taken its place faster than I as a human can react to. So I have clicked on the wrong thing. You guys ever clicked on the wrong thing on the internet? Oof. What a bad feeling. And you hate those nasty web developers who made you do that, right? Like, yeah, don't be that web developer. You know who else is really fast, has fast fingers? Han Solo. He shot first. Let your users be as fast as Han Solo, and they will be happy. Here's another question. Do you know when you have a JavaScript error? Now, this question may be a little bit more complicated than it seems. Yeah, you have reporting for your errors, but if JavaScript is handling the reporting of your JavaScript errors, well, something could definitely go wrong there, right? So you have to be very responsible about wrapping those your error handling in a reporting mechanism that's going to continue to work for you. Server-side stack traces are a lot more fun. You know a lot more about your server-side errors, and at every company I've ever been on, server-side errors are much higher in the docket for the dev team than client-side errors. No matter how important those client-side errors may be. If you have pages that cannot be rendered at all due to something that you've done wrong, that is an all-hands-on-deck kind of alert situation. So server-side rendering, again, it's so good, it's so cool. But what should we render on the server? Do we render the whole page on the server? Well, certainly not if that page has any customization involved in it. You're not going to be able to cache it, right? Can't cache that full HTML if there's any personalization in it whatsoever. You also may have a lot of trouble with the caching strategy that is reliant on both server-side rendering and timely content, such as comments. So at BuzzFeed, which obviously is a company that has a lot of thoughts about the timeliness of our content, what this is broken down into is a strategy where we always load the majority of a page first, or whatever the page is supposed to do. For us, it's really easy to know what a page is supposed to do. It's supposed to have some paragraph tags and some image tags. Wow, it's really easy. Maybe what your pages are supposed to do is something much more complicated. Maybe you're working on Google Maps, or maybe you're working on a video player. Nonetheless, you can still take advantage of the notion that you are the one in control of choosing the order that content will be loaded in, and that you want to get everything above the fold or that is most important for the user first, and then adopt a progressive loading strategy for further components that come in later, such as like a user menu might be something to late load because you don't want to, you still want the benefits of personalization. Or again, comments, because they are updated so frequently. You don't want to have such an absurd time to live on the page itself. So 6 surprising tips for saving yourself from JavaScript. You might want to try a Golden Path integration test case that runs without JavaScript enabled. If you have infinite scrolling, you could still have a more link. This is actually true for links in general. Anything like pagination links, forms, all of these can still work if you're thinking about the HTML first instead of the JavaScript first. If you have a modal, it should have a URL. If you have forms, remember that you're still writing HTML forms, even if you're handling the running of them with Ajax. What we actually saw earlier was a really great example of a form. Yeah, that I mean, it was dressed up with JavaScript. There was clearly stuff like an autocomplete for the calendar that I wasn't using, but it still worked. It still sent valid data to the server and got back a valid response. Never re-implement functionality that browsers implement better. I mean, can't see anyone having a web strategy that actually involves like just sending out big amounts of content, like statically generated content to users. They can have as much of it as they want. I mean, that would be sort of shitty for your servers, but it would be really good for a browser, because a browser knows how to handle that. So don't try to solve stuff like scrolling or progressive enhancement, progressive loading of images unless you have a good reason to. And lastly, maybe your acceptance tests suck because everything is implemented with Ajax. It's a possibility. You only have one job as a web developer, which is to render comprehensible HTML quickly. Think of Han Solo. He's mad at you. JavaScript can make your life easier. It is certainly not the best tool for every job that you are faced with. And if you disregard all of this, this it's a really dangerous path to go down. You are going to create accessibility problems. You're going to create maintainability problems. For one thing, we exist in a world where JavaScript is so much the default that if you're really only hiring for JavaScript, you're going to, for like client-side JavaScript, you're going to cut yourself off, I think, to even some of the better talent that can be found out there. But you know what? Maybe none of that matters to you. Maybe having a read more link that only works with JavaScript enabled is how you ensure that users are still getting tracked by your analytics. Maybe if they don't want to have your analytics on their page, they don't get to read your content. Maybe you're Google Maps and it's not 2009 anymore and they have dropped a non-JavaScript friendly alternative for that product. Only a Sith deals in absolutes. There are exceptions to every rule, including everything that I've said here. But what I would really like to encourage you to do is to turn JavaScript off on your site anyway. Take a look at what breaks and what doesn't, and trust yourself and your project managers or product managers about whether that's okay. How much of this is a path you need to go down, and how much of it doesn't matter to you. For instance, so I've been running this talk in Chrome, but if I do it in Safari, does anyone notice something missing? Yeah, the stars. Because how did I do those stars, huh? I made 10,000 tiny white divs with JavaScript. Yep, well, I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed. So mobile first, something we say a lot. Yep. JavaScript last. Wait, were you guys all laughing at that? All right. Mobile first, JavaScript last. Come argue with me online. Ask me any questions. Thank you very much.